All right, so I've got a relatively tough question for you guys. This is Mr. J from Organized Biology. You have cholesterol in your blood, right? But cholesterol is a fat, and fats do not mix in water. But your blood is mostly water. So how is a fat carried in the watery environment of your blood? Well, it's interesting you ask. Thank you for that question. But they're not all the same size. In fact, you've got a lot of cholesterol here, kind of moderate here, and then really small here. But the cholesterol is not by itself. In fact, wrapped around the cholesterol is a variety of molecules we call carrier proteins. So these guys are carrier proteins, things like albumin and globulin. And these carrier proteins are actually hydrophilic. That means they like to hang out with water. And as you can see, the hydrophilic part is surrounding the cholesterol, which is hydrophobic. So in a way, although the cholesterol doesn't want to be by the water, the carrier proteins basically cover it up so that it appears as though it is dissolved in water. I use the example of if this is the cholesterol molecule in the blood of the air, my hands would be like the carrier proteins. You don't see any part of the cholesterol interacting with the watery environment outside of itself, so it can dissolve well. However, as you can see, there's varying amounts of cholesterol here. We've got a lot here, relatively small here with a pretty good amount of protein still around it, and then we've got this one with a lot of protein around it, but very little cholesterol. Well, there's three types of cholesterol. This first one is called VLDL. VLDL. This stands for very low density lipoprotein. Very low density lipoprotein. Well, what does it mean? Well, there's a very low density to it. Well, in reality, lipids are they're not as dense as, say, proteins. So proteins, I want you to remember, are very dense, whereas fats are not very dense. All right, cholesterol, not dense. So since we have so much cholesterol in proportion to our proteins, it's relatively low density. It's mostly like the fat. The next one you can probably predict is something called LDL. LDL just stands for low density lipoprotein. Okay? And then lastly, we have HDL. That stands for high density lipoprotein. Why is that? Well, we've got, once again, lipids and proteins inside of it, but most of it is the protein, which is very dense, and that's why we call it HDL. Now, generally speaking, for many, many decades, we've known that high-density lipoprotein has a good correlation with good cardiovascular outcomes. So if you have a good HDL, you generally have good heart health. Whereas, let's say if you have really high VLDL and very high LDL, these two things are correlated with poor cardiovascular health. So, most of the time, doctors will encourage you to eat healthy fats like unsaturated, polyunsaturated, because it generally raises your HDL cholesterol. However, high LDL, high VLDL, some people, it doesn't bother them at all unless they have other issues with them. But generally speaking, doctors are going to be a little more concerned about these guys being high. So I always remember you want H high, but you want the L's low. Hope this is helpful.